I think everybody can benefit from data in their lives, but data is kind of complicated and messy. Nobody wakes up in the morning looking for data, but or most people don't. And sometimes you are in that job, but it, having the right data can help anyone. You could be a teacher, you could be, you know, in a legal profession, you could be in healthcare profession. Having data and information to be able to make better decisions and um, do your job better, achieve your professional potential to its fullest is how I always thought about it. Like everybody can do better if they have access to the right information and insights, but it's hard to get to, and that was the vision that I want to solve that problem.
Welcome to the Immigrant Pod. My name is Martin. I am your host, and today I am truly very excited. As always, we continue to bring you guests that are here to blow your minds and challenge you to capacity. If you're looking to fail forward, you are looking to succeed, this is the platform for you. In today's show at the pod, we are joined by Saket Saurabh. He is an Indian-born tech visionary, and here it is, co-founder and CEO of Nexla, and a leader reshaping how data powers business. From IIT Kanpur to Wharton to Silicon Valley, Saket's journey is a masterclass in immigrants, Greek innovation, and the future of AI and work. Before we dive in, remember to follow us on TikTok at the Immigrant Nation, Instagram, the Immigrant Nation, Facebook, the Immigrant Nation Podcast, LinkedIn and YouTube, the Immigrant Nation Pod, or the Immigrant Nation Podcast. Please share and subscribe. That helps the show, it helps the guest, it helps you. Sir, I get to shut my mouth and let you talk. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Martin. So my name is Saket. I'm right now co-founder and CEO at Nexla, and building the company with the vision that we want to solve the hard challenges of data so that more people can use data day to day in their lives and take advantage of all the AI advancements and trying to unlock that. That's kind of our mission. Um, I'm happy to share my journey in how I got here. Starting with being born in India. Yeah, does that sound good?
So I am actually gonna fast forward because I'm really
Okay.
curious, right? You worked for Nvidia and you decided, you know what, I am gonna go out there and challenge how you do business.
Yeah.
What was your motivation?
Well, I wasn't looking to challenge Nvidia. Nvidia is an extremely innovative company, and they're the best at what they do. I do see my time at Nvidia, which started in the year 2002, and I was there until somewhere around 2008. I do see that as a very formative set of years for myself. I was coming in as an engineer, and by the time I left Nvidia, I had grown into a product role and started to see how business is built. I joined Nvidia when it was roughly 1,500 or less people, so much smaller, and I actually had a chance to be an entrepreneur inside of Nvidia. Jensen's vision in those years, in the early 2002 2004 era, was that GPUs should be and can be leveraged in more use cases than video gaming, which was the primary use of GPUs at the time. And I was fortunate enough as an engineer to be part of a very small team to say, go ahead and explore ideas, try to build some prototypes, see what can work and what makes business sense. And over the years, I got to work on many different ideas. The ones that became very big, like automotive and computing, to ones that were mild but timely successes for us, like becoming part of PlayStation 3, leading the system software for that. And in 2004 was a very rough year for Nvidia. For scale, I would say that when I was at Nvidia, I think the year 2002, they were probably around a $2 billion market cap, and today they're 5 trillion. So 2,500 times growth in the company. I think most Nvidians who were there with me at the time would not have imagined that in their wildest dreams. Semiconductor was not the hot sector. It was Google at the time, and social media was up and coming, right, in those years. So the goal was not to go, of course, challenge Nvidia, but the goal was to take the lessons from Nvidia, having been an entrepreneur inside, to say, I have more to offer and more to prove, perhaps. And have really learned how to solve really hard problems in very elegant ways. And can I take that, what I have learned, and do something, by myself on my own, and build an idea? And I actually left Nvidia to join the business school at Wharton. And for me, that was kind of a leap from being an engineer to starting to think like a business person. And I'll just note that, coming from in India, from a non-business family in America, I had no idea how businesses work, by the way, right? And I just come in right from undergrad, so lot of learning over the years. But yeah, that was the driver for me, at least.
Okay, so let's unpack what
Yeah.
you just said, right? I mean, um, I can't. How do you even sit down? You sit down. You're like, when I was there, we were like a $2 billion company. I know part of my contribution I've gotten them to that $5 trillion valuation. I mean, that's mind blowing. But what really is exciting for me is to imagine you catching the vision for Jensen, right? And what you can do with GPUs. What does that look like for you as an immigrant when you sit in a room and you're challenged to start looking at opportunities or the world in a way that most people don't really see it? How do you take that opportunity and maximize it for capacity?
Yeah, I think the immigrant sort of experience has a very or an important role to play in my life. And of course, Jensen was an immigrant as well, and I had heard his story, sort of coming in at an early age and sort of going through various hardships until he went and started Nvidia. And Nvidia itself as a company went through a didn't go through this explosive growth day one. I mean, they had like 20 25 years when Nvidia was more or less flat like a company before it took off, right? So at that time, for me, it was kind of inspirational to see that. And there were not many examples of technical people becoming founder CEOs, okay, in the valley. Even in the valley at the time, that was not the case. Technical people would become CTOs, they would not become CEOs. So working at Nvidia, seeing Jensen, and I was small enough that I had a few times like opportunities to talk to him and hear his way of thinking, which was very inspirational. One thing about being an immigrant is that I always look at my baseline, like where did I come from? And at the time, at least, I was very young. I mean, at the time, relatively fresh out of college. I always thought about like, what do I have to lose? Look at where I am. I'm coming from a small town in India, which is one of the most backward places or states in India. I came from there to California and Silicon Valley. I'm like pinching myself, like, okay, that's possible. So the base is just like what do you got to lose, right? The worst that could happen is still way better than what you have seen in the past. And I think that sort of gives, at least to me, a little bit of that superpower kind of thing, that I'm willing to go and give it a try and push forward. Now, I came from a strong technical background, so for me, part of the thing was like, hey, here's a problem, I think I can figure it out. And I wasn't afraid to take risk in moving to this really small team, which was largely skunkworks in the company. And most people were working the main line of the business. What I was doing was not going to make any money for the company that year or next year, but it had the chance to become important. And what happened was, along the way, we built a lot of ideas that did not go anywhere. The first idea I worked on, I think, was in 2003, was digital picture frame. Those were kind of a thing at the time. And we're like, hey, could we apply our technology here? Could it have a better experience than what we have seen? That was a failed experiment. Then we did something else around arcade gaming. Then we got into PlayStation 3. At the time, the company wasn't doing well, and I had the chance to go to Tokyo, work with the team in Sony, and really figure out how this would work. There's a lot of new technology being put together. And I think that a willingness to like take risk and be like, let's push the limits, let's try what can happen, sort of helped me unlock some of the things in those scenarios. And then ultimately we got into a rhythm of building new ideas and testing them to market and saying, yeah, that doesn't make sense, or this does, and what should we double down on. So I think that was certainly a part of the whole experience for me.
So uh, it's just fascinating how eloquent you are in how you express your ideas and how you express yourself. It's it's truly interesting to see that you had a willingness to take whatever risk was necessary um, to drive change. When that is happening in your life, in the background there's still the responsibility of family, and there's still the responsibility of paying bills and all that good stuff. Walk us through how any immigrant can balance through those two scenarios.
Yeah. um, I think, and this was, I mean, Nvidia was a far less risky place for me because I had come in the year 99, and 6 months in I had left to my, first job to join a startup which died in a year later during the dot-com crash, then went to another startup which also went down. So I was like, I've seen worse, and always the baseline, like, how bad can it be. Worst case, I'll go back to India, I'll do a basic job and whatever, right? So I was always sort of okay with that. I'm like, and then so it's like you're comfortable with your baseline, and then you're willing to go as far as you can, because you know what, no matter where you fall, you'll be still, you still have a baseline to go to. So I think that for me, like balancing supporting family and other things, and I think this happens with most immigrants. When I came here, I had a bit of a guilt in me, in the sense that I'm here in all this nice places which I never imagined. I'd only seen that in movies, and I think coming to the US was my first airplane flight in my life. Stuff like that was crazy. I'd only been on trains, in India at the time. Like, this is year 99, and it's a very different country than what it is today. So I think a lot of it was that guilt was like, okay, I really wanted to, like, for me it was taking care of the family back there. My parents, my siblings, my younger brother was going to college. Like, okay, I need to, provide money for that, or my sister was getting married and all that stuff, right? So there was always that sense of like supporting the family was like taking care of the family around you. eh, and I mean, I was single at the time, so it's not like I had kids and all of my own, but I felt like just keeping my own needs to a minimum, like a very bare bones, apartment, living in, sharing with somebody, not having anything fancy. The only fancy thing I owned, by the way, was this very nice BMW motorcycle, because I grew up in India riding these motorcycles, and which were very small, like a moped basically. But I'd been doing that, and then I came to the US. I was like, I gotta have a nice motorcycle to myself, and I didn't have. I had a 15-year-old car, like bare bones, but then I had a nice motorcycle. So I didn't have much of a. I didn't own much until a much longer time in life. I was like, I want to have minimum like things holding me back. I can move anywhere. I can move my job. Um, and all I wanted to do was work, to be honest. Like, I am a live to work person, because for me somehow it's been ingrained, is like, what am I doing, what am I creating, what's my output, not in terms of money. It's in terms of like, am I doing things that are making me giving me personal satisfaction of creativity in some ways. Creativity, as you can see, sometimes as an engineer, I would say. Okay.
So I like the way you're driven. Change is what has been pulling you, change is what is pushing you. And you've really embraced that well, right? I bet you if we were in the same room, we would not be talking about work-life balance. We would be talking about how do we complete this
Yeah.
project. And that, for me, I think that's a really elegant way of living life. And especially if you do enjoy what you do.
Yeah.
But in the pursuit of excellence, you also had this raggedy car that was getting you to work or to the destination you wanted to go to, and you had this motorcycle, and you lived in this humble apartment. Why was that necessary? Why did you feel the need to live a humble life, although you could have, you know lived with a little frugality. I mean, without a little frugality.
Yeah, I mean, it was odd that I start my first job and I'm making more money in a month than what probably my dad was making in 5 years. It's kind of crazy. And I feel like there's definitely this sort of guilt or imposter syndrome or whatever that be, right? In the sense that I don't really need a whole lot. Um, and I think for me, growing up in India, maybe getting two new clothes in a year at best, or um, small family. My dad was an engineer, so we're not like poor, but we're not even upper middle class by that means, right? But I don't think it made me any less happy. So kind of felt like I had a good, happy life. I know family and fun. Um, you know, playing cricket with bare bones, like not a proper field, no protective gear, like just find a bat and a ball, and you still have fun because what you're doing and who you're doing it with, and just being in that moment. So I never felt like happiness comes from buying more things. So I think maybe that
Hmm.
was partly the reason that I felt pretty satisfied and happy, and I didn't feel like compelled to you know go spend a lot of money. I did, of course. Life became more comfortable, of course, but yeah. um I would say it has changed
Saket,
a lot now
as
with
you
three kids and a family. Like, you start to
go
do
ahead.
things differently when it's not just you by yourself, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So from bootstrapping to this large organization that we're about to get into and start talking about, but as you were starting to experience some success, right? And this is really, really important for most immigrants because we come here, we migrate to the countries, we start working, we start seeing some success, but we have family and we have friends and we have all these things that we left behind that we want to see change. As you start to succeed, you are like, okay, I need to reach back to my brother and to my sister and to this relative and to this friend so that they can also start seeing a difference in life like I am seeing it. Did you ever had that inkling?
um there is that, and I think that many things in life can often get in the way, and sort of finding the time and focus for that can be hard. I do feel like and I hear this from my siblings and cousins, that my journey actually sort of was an eye opener, or in many ways, or a door opener for people, like, okay, what is possible. And I think fortunately a lot of my cousins and in my family have done very well in life as well. And uh, you know doing things for friends and family has um, always been an important thing. I mean, that's kind of how you, as I said, when you come from a place and you come to a point where you are unbelievably, nice place, then you do feel that guilt in a way. I, to be honest, was a little bit fortunate that several of my friends also over time moved into the US and in neighboring areas. So I kind of feel like I got the best of both. My siblings moved to the US as
Mhm.
well over time, and a lot of my friends. So I think that I think an immigrant dream is always that you can also bring a little bit of your community and family and friends with you. And I feel like that happened in the course of time for me, and I feel very fortunate for that, actually.
I am so happy for you. So, what was your immigration struggle? Did you, as an immigrant, ever have issues with the migration process?
Yeah, it's a complicated process, right? So I came on an H1 visa. The thing with the H1 visa at the time when I came was that every time you switch a job, you have to get a new one, and you have to renew, and you're kind of in that job. And I came in um, to be in Silicon Valley to innovate. I was like, I'm in the middle of all the things that are happening, and I want to be part of that. So I ended up, as I said, jumping in from my first job to a startup very early on. I didn't realize or care much about sort of how it will impact immigration, but it did over time. Um, and I couldn't get my green card process started, and then therefore when I was at Nvidia, and I was like, waiting and waiting that, okay, it's been 6 years, hopefully I can get my green card, because my goal is to start a company, but I can't start a company until I have my, permanent residence, and there are restrictions around that. um it took a while. It took me 11 years to get that, and still got that through my wife, because I wasn't staying in a job long enough, perhaps, and have patience enough to do that. The My wife stayed in the same job for 11 years, so she was able to get
Yeah.
work through that. I did end up in places where I remember we went on a trip to China, and I had to keep renewing every time, and processing was slow. So I had to leave the family behind, come back to the US, because if I didn't come back, then I couldn't, they wouldn't let me in. My last date was coming up, and they had not processed my application for over 3 months. So there were many such cases where you kind of have to work within the limitations of that. There are things you want to do, you can't, do that. I had time when I got laid off from my job in 2002, and it was a bad economy in here. It's not like I can go even like take a part-time job somewhere to make some money, right? There's nothing you can do. Your visa is tied to your employer, and you have to find a new employer and do that. So there were phases whereas, but I think for me at the time, I remember I was like, okay, the only thing I got is my motorcycle. I'll sell it, I'll move it back. If this is what it's meant to be, then so be it. Right. Like, but fortunately, it was at the time.
You did not sell a motorcycle, right?
Yeah, it was at the time that I'm like, driving around, and I'm like, oh, Nvidia. Oh, I love their product. I wish I could work here. I really like the tech that they build, and it's a small company. It's not, it was known, like, if you're a gamer, Nvidia. Otherwise, you don't know what the company does. Just like another semiconductor company. And I happened to be driving past San Tomas Expressway and see the office. I'm like, that clicks a light bulb in my head, and I go looking. Nobody's hiring in the valley at the time, and turns out that they had a job opening. So I immediately like, okay, I gotta get that somehow. And I remember still like, I don't know, somehow I got invited to the interview, and I'm sitting in the lobby, and I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be amazing if I could just get this job? And I'm wishing for it and hoping for it. And 14 interviews later, it does happen. Like, I get the offer. So it's crazy in some ways. I can't believe myself that this is happening. Um, but yeah, it's been quite, immigration side of things always created a bit of complexity or unexpected sort of a situation where for me it was always like, okay, I'm ready to pack and go, if that's what it means.
Okay. So you have this 11-year time period that I'm curious about,
Yeah.
because in that time period you were not able to file for your status, but you did it through your wife who had held a job for that time period. You had gone through multiple jobs. So why?
Why did I do that?
Yeah.
I think, I was like, I did try my best to stay in the same. So the thing was, I'm always like, I want to do the next thing and figure out and push myself. But at some point, you have done what you could do, and you're like, okay, I'm not being challenged enough right now, and I need to be challenged more. So you're constantly seeking that, and you're trying to balance between like, okay, for the sake of immigration, I should just stay put. But then the person inside me is like, I really want to go to business school, and that's kind of was my thing in 2007. Was like, okay, I absolutely want to go study, and that was part of my goal. And when that opportunity came, I got an admission, I had to make the choice, and I went. And the problem with me was that my application would go far, and then it would come back. Every time you change a job, it resets back to the beginning. Now it's gotta file all over again, and the queue is just getting longer every year, right? So that was the challenge. But yeah, I think I don't know, it's kind of hard to rationalize perhaps. But that's kind of part of, if I were comfortable with where I am, I would probably never have immigrated. So part of the being an immigrant is like, you see things on yourself, and you're like, this is a fine place, but I have to do something. That itch inside you is kind of pushing you, and sometimes, it's just something better in life or something better in opportunity. For me, a good part was like, coming out of college in 99, I was like, I want to do really high quality technology work. There's none of that happening in India, and I have to really be in California, in Silicon Valley, and I have to figure out how to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Nexla has been described as defying startup norms with a slow and steady growth model. Why did you choose that route? Why did you start Nexla?
Yeah, I started Nexla with the basic goal and vision that, and I'd done a startup before, right? So I'd come out of that, and I was like, I think everybody can benefit from data in their lives, but data is kind of complicated and messy. Nobody wakes up in the morning looking for data, but or most people don't, and sometimes you are in that job, but it, having the right data can help anyone. You could be a teacher, you could be, you know, in a legal profession, you could be in healthcare profession. Having data and information to be able to make better decisions, and um, do your job better, achieve your professional um, potential to its fullest, is how I always thought about it. Like, everybody can do better if they have access to the right information and insights, but it's hard to get to. And that was the vision, that I want to solve that problem. It's a hard problem, data is messy, and I want to make it easier. AI was not there at the time, machine learning was definitely there, but it's hard to build and hard to apply. And now, because of AI, data is become really, really important. You can throw any piece of data at it, and help sort of get meaningful insights out of that, or easy to understand, right? So the vision was always to go there. The goal was, we want to build, you know um, really defining technology, really go at a hard problem, and do some foundational work on that. And the challenge was that, commercial sort of traction is the main sort of factor that you do. And sometimes when you're trying to build core innovation, it may take a bit longer than you think. So the balance for me was, stick at the core problem, solve it, bit by bit, and try to get commercial traction to it. um, but don't run out of money, because if you do that, then all the work goes to waste, right? So the slow and steady sort of came to bring that balance, that it may take a bit longer for the technology we're trying to build to be fully viable, because we're trying to solve a hard problem. And um, sometimes the approach is, go big or go bust quickly. I knew that the problem I'm working on and the solution that I'm working for is not like, let's try, if it works, hugely great, if it not, it was a failure. I knew that what we're building is valuable, it is a good quality solution, but it may need certain amount of time to um, sort of mature enough so that can show commercial value. So that's the reason why it was, slow and steady, instead of very fast and then out of breath and dead. You don't want I didn't want to do it that way. Okay.
Excellent. Let's get into a boardroom.
Yeah.
Um, so I find it really interesting when I hang out with immigrants. They're really, really smart, really, really educated. They have amazing ideas, but they mostly are challenged to, like, they're humble about their ideas and they don't want to speak out. They want to hide in the background, and somebody says their idea and they're like, oh, I have that and I can compliment it. But as an immigrant who's been in some of the most amazing boardrooms in the past, how do you insert yourself into the conversation? How do you bring your ideas to life
Yeah.
to add value to a group?
Yeah. I think you're perhaps alluding to the fact that in many cultures outside the US, for example, um,
Mhm.
especially cultures with a lot of respect for elders, for example, you grow up in this sort of mode where um, you're being assertive, confident, sort of marketing yourself, telling how great you are, is not, you know, um, l- looked at as a positive thing. You're trained sort of mentally growing up to be humble, to listen to others, to give sort of, never speak highly of yourself. But when you come, I think the culture in the US, in many ways, it's a country which really excels in marketing. Look at everything is
Mhm.
produced in the country, whether it's, movies or music, it's always at a very grand scale. It's not just like, three people sit down and have great music, and so it's marketed, it becomes commercialized. Sports here, for example, like, everything is big. And marketing plays a big role in that, to sort of tell the bigger picture, the bigger story. And you understand the importance of doing that when, in a capitalism driven society, that it's extremely important, because that's how you communicate the value of what you're doing. That's how you get more people to sort of believe in you, and all of that stuff. There's a whole reason why it is there and why it works, why it makes sense. But coming from immigrant culture, it's kind of a little bit foreign to be doing that. And I think what you're pointing out is that in a boardroom, that can create its own challenges as well, especially, for me, for example, as an engineer, an introvert, being a little bit shy, confident in what I do and know. There's not a lack of confidence, by the way, in immigrants in that way. It's just that our way of communicating that is slightly different, right? And so in a boardroom and in these situations, like, confidence matters, being assertive, being saying, okay, this is what we should do, even though you are not 100% sure that this is the right thing. And you may do more analysis and all of that stuff, but you are rewarded for making a bold decision, even if it's the wrong one, and then being able to correct yourself and do that, because people want clarity. And that's a very important skill to acquire. I'm not at all undermining the importance of this, but that's a skill to acquire. So when it comes to the boardroom, I think one of the important things is that you also take on a persona. You, me, or any person, as a brother, or as a father, or as an engineer, or as a CEO, or as a manager. We have different personas. We take on that persona in that particular role. So when you think about the CEO role, there is a persona that there's a role that you are playing. There's something expected of you. People need a certain type of signals from you, and in the boardroom that becomes extremely important. I think the way I approach that is, you have to understand your methodology of communicating that works best. For example, writing down your ideas and sort of distilling that down, and the decision and all of that stuff, maybe, and then reading it back out may be better for someone, whereas somebody else may be very good at the spur of the moment to just stand up and say, and very eloquently sort of execute that, right? Whereas somebody else may be like, work with different board members separately, one-on-one, build the consensus and bring that out. However you do that, I think the important thing is to understand what works best for you. There's certainly a learning process. You have to get out of the comfort zone because you're working or you're delivering a certain persona. You have to be able to do that, right? And deliver for that role that you are in. And I think that matters a lot, because you have to meet the expectations of the people you're in front of. They expect something, they expect to see something, they expect a certain type of process and approach. So it's a constant learning experience, and I feel like every time I have a board meeting, I'm learning with that. And sometimes when I don't follow my own process, I can see that I didn't do as well as I could have. Yeah.
Okay, so something powerful, because I'm picking it up from your construction. You've used this single word over 13 times so far, learning. As an entrepreneur, you're sitting there, you're looking at opportunities. You've come from India, you're giddy, you're excited about getting things done. You see a path of how eventually things can work out. Talk to us about the lessons you're learning in boardrooms, in exchange conversations with friends, with mentors. What are you learning that is really starting to change you and to shape you to become the man you are today?
Oh, that's a heavy question. I mean, learning, I think, is obviously a continuous process. And a lot of the goal of learning, even when we learn something in school, is that you learn something and sort of rehearse it enough that it becomes part of your muscle memory, and it becomes part of your intuition in your thought process. Because there are certain things that you learn and you analyze, and then you do something, you do it enough number of times, that becomes part of your, what we say, what's your gut or what's your instinct and all that stuff, right? And that we build our instinct over time by learning things, right? So I think a lot of that is kind of how to take those lessons and make that into an instinct, whether that is, for example, an important part of the instinct becomes analyzing what's happening in the market or the domain around you, as a as a CEO, as a founder, and taking that instinctively and saying, how what does it mean for my business? What does it mean for the ecosystem? And how do I take action on that? Now, as you do that over time and as you get deeper and deeper into learning, I think um, that's one part of it. I would say, certainly from a learning perspective, I think I've learned a lot also about communication and the importance of that. And I think um, as you had also alluded to, right, you're not often talking about yourself, and or you assume that people made, because you have said it once, people remember that. And one of my biggest lessons has been that um, when you're talking to someone, you put yourself in their shoes. That person has a lot going on in their head, and when you talk to them, they may remember two or three things, and even those two or three things you have to repeat multiple times, so that you know those are the two or three things that you want them to remember. And there's a lot of that about communication that comes especially in a leadership role, because ultimately the goal is that you're giving people the right guide, direction, and enough enablement that so that they can act on their own. So they get the direction of where they should be thinking and focusing, but they are empowered with the freedom and the flexibility to take actions. But then they also understand when they should be coming back and sort of collaborating with you or consulting with you on that, right? So a lot of it becomes about communication. Ultimately, companies are like it's the people working together, and much of our job becomes how do you bring this group of people to create their best possible outcome as a team, together, right? So it's always, I feel like, working with people and doing that is the main challenge. Working with computers, more well defined what you put in and what you get out.
Yeah, fantastic. Immigrants, if you're just joining us today, we have the pleasure of speaking to Saket Saurabh. He is Indian-born tech visionary, co-founder, and CEO of Nexla. You can follow us on TikTok at Immigrant Nation and Instagram at the Immigrant Nation, Facebook at the Immigrant Nation Podcast, LinkedIn and YouTube, the Immigrant Nation Podcast. Sakib, tell our listeners where they can find you on social media.
I am on LinkedIn, pretty easy to find me. And you'll usually see me talking mostly about technology and our industry and our space.
Fantastic, fantastic. So, I come from a school of thought where I believe immigrants are our problem solvers. And at this, with the same thought, I also believe that immigrants as entrepreneurs have the tools and the skills to help the world leap in a very accelerated way forward. Talking about leaping and moving forward, um, you were co-founder of Nexla. What was the most challenging part of starting your organization, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I think starting the company itself, I think the most challenging part becomes finding the first early believers, because that kind of
Mhm.
becomes your other co-founders, early team members, investors, because you do need a certain minimum critical mass to get started. And at that time, it's just you and your idea and nothing else, right? Um, so the big part of the challenge for me was I was thinking of an idea in was a little bit far out at the time in terms of what people thought was possible or could be done. So getting that along, and also saying, like, hey, why not solve this problem or that problem, because that's easy, a lot of people are doing that, or that's a clear market need, whereas I'm looking at the more sort of complex and complex nature of data. And sometimes part of it was also that some people felt, oh, this problem is already solved, and I was like, no, it's not a solved problem yet. There's a lot to be done, and there's a big wave coming of how we want to take advantage of data. It's growing, there's a lot that can be done with it, but the foundations are missing, and that's what I'm trying to build. So much of the challenge for me was doing that. I actually took about a year's time to talk to several different leaders in companies and interview them, gather some data from them, and how they see the problems, and whether they my assessment of like, hey, this is how the world should be, this is how people can work with data, and this is how data should move maybe across companies and people can collaborate around, does that make sense to them, and do they see the value of that? Like, hey, imagine if this was possible, would you as a data leader in this company, in healthcare, in retail, in insurance, do you see the value of that? So I used that research to build some validation around the idea, and that helped me sort of frame the story better. That's how I kind of overcame that initial challenge. And some of that conversation also led to initial sort of signaling on where can I go find my early customers. So there's always a challenge in starting a company and actually saying that this is it, because the thing is that when you sit down you can have 20 ideas, but you can't work on 20
Yeah.
ideas. So part of the challenge, you have to say like which one is the right one. And I kind of use a framework that I learned in business school actually, which is like running an innovation tournament. So you are kind of keeping a track of different ideas, and you are kind of scoring them, and you're seeing which ones are moving further ahead over time as you're doing your research, which ones are going further ahead, and which one looks like is the winner that you want to then bet on. So there's some science that can be applied there, but there's a lot of instinct that you have built over the years that you apply to say, okay, this is what I should go for. Because if everybody believes, if you give an idea to someone and everybody says, yeah, that's a great idea, most likely it's already being done because by then it's too late.
Yeah.
Usually you
Yeah.
want to find an idea and you're working on it, and it's like some people think it can be amazing, some people think it sucks, and there's some sort of an opinion around that, um, right? Because some people will say, oh, it's not possible to do it. That's kind of your signal as an entrepreneur, right? And yeah, when you say entrepreneur immigrant, I feel like entrepreneurship is being uncomfortable and pushing at boundaries on some ideas, and sort of being able to explore and go beyond what's already out there. So in many ways, immigrants sort of demonstrate that as they move out of their comfort zone and put themselves into a new place and figure it out and settle that in. So kind of self-selecting into a pool, that pool is more likely to have entrepreneurs because they've already shown certain signals. Because think about it, right? You are in a company, in a job, your colleagues, you go out to lunch with them, you hang out with them, you have friends there. You leave that and you go start a company. Now you're just yourself, you know and you're trying to get somebody else to also believe and work with you. So you can end up in a much more uncomfortable spot that way, right? From your day-to-day life and all that. And then you're an entrepreneur, you're not making money, and you're doing this for 6 months and a year, and I was like, okay, so are you making any money doing this, or this is just like, where is the there to it, right? So there are a lot of questions that come up, and maybe not that dissimilar from
Let's
so yeah.
let's speak about those challenges, right? Of starting a new
Yeah.
venture. And it feels to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like when you're starting your company, you're already married, you're already a family man, right? That comes with different challenges because there's a certain expectation to play the role of what you are in your household. How do you prepare, or how did you specifically prepare your family for this 1 or 2 years where you knew you were gonna go plug in, there was a possibility that there was no revenue coming through?
Yeah, I think largely it was having a timeline in mind, and even more so, I would say it's very important if you're an entrepreneur to get lucky in your partner, who is with you the journey and is like, okay, you go do your thing, do it for 2 years. If you figure it out, great. If not, then go back and find a job, right? And be willing to say that, what, I can hold the fort here for that much time, and that sort of a thing, right? So I think you're out there figuring things out, which can often be a difficult or adversarial world out there, but you always go back to your family as the support system, that somebody believes in you. Because the challenge with being an entrepreneur is very few people believe in you, and you're trying to build more believers. But when you are in doubt, sometimes your family sort of is the believer, right? So there is that is certainly a part of it. But yeah, having a timeline, having a plan, all of that becomes important in that function.
You have obviously enjoyed some success in what you are doing now, but we both know that you've not built your success alone. You've had partners, starting with your wife and the people who have come around you. Walk us through the process of identifying the right teammates earlier on a new startup.
Oh yeah, I mean, super important, right? The team that you start with, the co-founders that you work with is extremely important. I mean, so many ideas will just not go beyond the first few steps because the initial founding team is not able to align and work together, right? So uh, for me, fortunately, much of my starting team was part of my team in my previous startup as well. So relationships built over time, I think, was a good part of that. um, uh, I think one thing as a founder is you have to be really good at identifying the right people and be able to convince them to join you. So hiring is a very important skill. It's a hard skill also. It's not easy to become good at that. Um,
Yeah.
and that's one thing that I'm also constantly learning and looking back at prior signals and saying, how can I get better at finding and hiring the right people? And I think that nothing makes for success more than finding the right people by your side. You have the right team next to you, you can basically achieve anything and overcome any challenging situation. You don't have that, there's not much you can do by yourself. It's all teamwork, right? uh,
Yeah, yeah. So it takes a little bit of work to get the right team. How about casting the vision?
Casting the vision, you mean?
Hmm.
I do want to note, by the way, in terms of building a company, it takes a village, and there are so many people who. The way I think about this is that you want the early adopters to believe. So there are people out there in the world who always want to be just like you, on the cutting edge, and want to try the latest, even as customers, right? So think about the person who'll go buy the latest version of the phone or the newest device because they're very curious about technology or innovation. And I think finding those people is very key to it. um, but then it takes a village, people who believe in you and are willing to take the bet. So yeah, casting the vision, I think that's why it goes across not just investors and team members but also customers. People buy from startups only because they believe that what the people there are doing is something that they align with, something that you wish you had. I mean, that's what you are basically selling as a startup. You're selling innovation. So think about, somebody comes to you and says, hey, I made this cool gadget, and you're like, I had always wished that something like this existed. I'm glad you made that, and I'm also that early adopter who's willing to put some money to that and do it. And I know that innovation sometimes has rough edges, and I'm okay with that because I get something valuable out of this which I had imagined. But many other people be like, I don't care about this thing, it's fine. And you have to find and cast a vision and identify those people who really care about that. Okay, eventually that innovation becomes standard, and then everybody becomes a willing user or buyer.
Very good, very good. So, in 2025, 2024, AI is really taking the
Mm-hmm.
forefront in everything that we do to life. And this is where, I believe you have a good base of understanding for the average immigrant out there who does not have coherence to really know what's going on in the world. So, if you are speaking to a group of immigrants that are not tech savvy, that are not in your type of field, how should they start looking at the world today, in a year, in 2 years, 5 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think AI, especially as a technology, is one that evokes a lot of different emotions. There's excitement for the innovation, but there's also fear because AI will take a lot of jobs that people do. I mean, the way I see that is that the evolution of technology is what is going to be. And for us, is to say that, hey, I'm not going to be changing that course, but how do I be part of that story? So it's just instead of being wondering whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing and whether it will work or not, I'm more in the camp that, hey, this is happening, there's a wave that is happening, let's get aligned to that. Let's learn about it as much, and that's why you'll see the word learning a lot. But let's learn about it, let's use it, let's get native with it, because ultimately we'll be in a place where this will be part of our day-to-day. Think of it as like the internet. It's like, oh, I don't understand internet, I don't know what it means, and then that's kind of how we used to see our parents, perhaps, right? And then like, no, try the technology, it's good, it works. It's the same thing happening with AI. So I think that it's important to do that. The other part I think that becomes important is to understand that it's a very foundationally different type of innovation, and it's a huge innovation. I wouldn't underestimate the wave that it is. It could be one of the biggest pieces of innovation in the last couple of centuries, right? In that sense, right? In terms of impact, right? Already hundreds of millions of people are using ChatGPT every day, and that we're just in the beginning. So I think that it is happening where these systems can do a lot of independent type of actions and can be trained to do many different types of work, whether it is generative, like writing something out, creating an image, creating a video, or also sort of doing some reasoning and say, hey, to solve this problem, I need to take these 10 steps, and go ahead and do that. Try giving a math problem to ChatGPT, right? It does a pretty good job of that. So you realize that is where it's headed. It will have a big impact. We don't know how big it will be. But the only thing I'll say is to be comfortable with that uncertainty and just embrace it with both arms. Try to learn as much as you can about the technology, use it day to day, because ultimately those who get comfortable with it and know how to use it well are the ones who will be able to create value for themselves. And I think ultimately we have to learn how to master technology.
In a world of generative AI and large language models, for Nexla, how do you fit your work into the larger AI ecosystem?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. See, where AI is going right now is that we talk about agentic systems, which means that an agent is someone who can take a goal, figure out the action, and sort of act independently towards that, right? So what is happening is that agents are going to become, or are becoming, the biggest users of data. How does an agent, an AI agent work, really, right? It has to get some information. Hey, what's sales looking like, and where are the orders, and things that as a human you would look at and take some action and say, oh, now I need to take this action based on that, I need to issue a refund and whatever, right? So agents are interfacing with different systems, and they will need data to make those decisions, and then they will need to take actions on the systems. So we see our job as a company that works on the data side to be feeding data to agents now. Previously, the main goal was to feed data into a dashboard or a visualization of what's happening in business. Now it's like feeding data to agents, doing that securely, and also giving the ability for agents to act on that data and that system. So we see ourselves as playing a foundational role in how AI systems will actually interface with the real world. Think about hundreds of applications or systems in an enterprise. How will agents interface with that? We provide that connectivity to those systems, and therefore see an important role for us in making that happen. And then obviously constantly understanding and reinventing, because needs and use cases will change over time as well. Okay.
There's this conversation in the marketplace of some people talking about um, AI replacing human jobs or transforming them. How can immigrants and represented communities prepare, knowing there are other immigrants out there who are like more gathered, who speaks about how AI will take over jobs and on and on and on. But how should we prepare
Yeah.
in communities that we're continually going into as migrants?
Yeah. I mean, maybe AI will take certain jobs or do certain jobs. I don't know what's going to happen on that front, but we do know that sitting there and waiting for something to happen is not the goal. The goal is like, okay, hey, what is AI doing today? AI is serving as a really good tool. It's like let's say you were asked to make a chair, and before you would like a handsaw and drill it and use a hammer and whatever. Now you got a power tool. You can do the same job in like 10 minutes, and you can do it better, right? So our job is to then learn that tool and use it effectively. The thing is that two things are happening with this new tool. New things are also possible to do which were not possible before, and so therefore I feel like a lot of the way to think about this is how do we use that tool effectively. And I think one thing that helps is uh, who is most effective with using AI is people who are able to articulate what is the goal and what does a good outcome look like, and then use AI to get to that good outcome. For example, you want to, you know, write a one-page article. You know what a good article looks like. You know what's the right content, what would make sense. You might use AI to help write that faster. Okay, use AI as a thought partner. Use AI as a tool. You can use it to test some ideas, just like you would with a friend, and see what that makes sense. Don't believe everything, because it's also hallucinating, and sometimes AI does act like it will say great idea to everything you say. So don't believe that. But I think it's important to say how do we leverage that better. And some of this AI will also go from generative to robotics and real world as well, because that's, you bring some of that agency of action to things, and that will happen as well. So yeah, I think knowing what good looks like, knowing what outcomes matter, a lot of it will come down to understanding people, understanding goals, what's happening in a business, and the person who can use AI to get that thing done is what's valued. Ultimately, I feel like as a business, you want people who can take a problem and go solve it, for you, right? And that's how you scale. So people who are able to take a problem and solve it, and maybe do it better and faster because they have used AI, and that's the goal. That's the place we want to be, and not worry about whether there are a finite number of jobs in the world. There are only 100 jobs, and 50 of them will be taken by AI, so there are only 50 more left. Maybe not. Maybe there'll be 200 jobs now, and each job people will be twice as productive because they use AI. So one of the big things is that economies grow when productivity increases, and AI can be a big productivity increase for many types of jobs that have traditionally not had the productivity increase happen so easily, right? Airline travel did that, big productivity increase. For example, I just was learning today how washing machines did a huge productivity increase because it allowed women to join the workforce at a level that wasn't possible before, because women were spending 8 hours a day doing household chores, and washing machine was a big unlock, and that brought more people. And then the economy grew more because more people participated in it. So we'll see how that goes. Just stay ahead of the thing and keep learning is my approach, at least.
Excellent. So Nexla focuses on making data ready to use.
Yeah.
What does that mean for an entrepreneur like myself?
Yeah. Ready to use, what it means largely is that when we are using, or when we are using data in some way, it may not be in the right place. For example, you're an entrepreneur, you are publishing some podcast and content, and one data may be very useful for you. Might be like, hey, what is working, what are the hot topics, and what how is something performing, and all of that stuff. Now that data may sit in many different systems, and it may not be very useful by just sitting there, right? Bringing that together in a certain structure, and then you can say, oh, I look at this and this is what is happening, right? So that's kind of what we think about as ready to use. And ready to use for AI means that can AI use that data effectively? So for example, now you can take a lot of your videos and they become searchable and they become accessible by AI. There is text and documents. So now you can put a lot of information together, say that it's kind of in that ready to use state, and now you can use AI, for example, to interact with it and ask questions that can give us maybe better ideas of what to do, or maybe track better how things are performing, right? So I think ready to use is all about taking information or data from places where it is not very usable to a point and a structure and a form where it becomes usable. And once it becomes usable, the goal is that everybody sort of takes advantage of that, right?
Yeah. So at some point you were working for other people, now you work for yourself. Um, what are some of the areas where you really struggled while you worked for other people, and where are you struggling now as an entrepreneur business owner?
Um, yeah, so I would say that so as an entrepreneur, when you say working for yourself, I tell my kids, like, they're like, oh, you don't have a boss, right? I'm like, no, we all are working for someone. We're all, I mean, as an entrepreneur, you're really working for a customer. And then you are obviously answerable to your board, right? Um, there's, I would say nothing like that. Um, um, yeah, I mean, we're all doing it because of a certain objective that we're working towards. It's not like, hey, do whatever you like, life is free. I'm like, that's only when you're a kid in summer vacation. That's the only time you have that. um,
So, Kate, if you are speaking to a group of immigrants, what is the one thing you would want all of them to know?
hmm, that's a great question. um I feel like, as an immigrant, it's believing in the possibilities largely, like believing like anything is possible, and having that optimism and having that bit of courage. I think that's how I see the immigrant experience, as a combination of that optimism and courage sort of coming together, to make happen what many would have looked at and said it's not possible, right? So yeah, I think my message to immigrants would be very much around like keeping up that spirit.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. All right, tell our listeners one more time where they can find you on social media, sir.
So I'm easily accessible on LinkedIn. Just look for my name and Nexla, and I should show up in the search results. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. We appreciate you making the time to come to the Immigrant Pod. My goodness, you're something else. So we are grateful. Thank you. You've given us amazing, amazing information. You've helped us be able to understand what the world looks like for an immigrant who's relentlessly pursuing their goal. Immigrants, if you find value in today's show, follow us again on TikTok and Instagram at the Immigrant Nation, and on Facebook at the Immigrant Nation Podcast, LinkedIn, YouTube, the Immigrant Nation Pod. So, Ken, thank you for making the time for us. Let's hang up together. Someday we need to get together and talk about what life is doing for you and for those who have invested their time and money with you.
Thank you so much, Martin. It's been a pleasure, and I think we got to chat about things that I've probably not chatted with anybody about at length. So appreciate you having me here.
Hey, excellent, excellent. If there's any way we can help you here at the pod, please let us know. We would love to do that. I am looking forward so much to our next conversation. From the bottom of my heart, I wish you the best. Thank you and welcome again.